Welcome to Interviews from Mexico. I'm Laura Carlson. I'll be your host as we look at cutting-edge issues with the men and women who know them best, here on teleSUR. More than a year after the night of Iguala, the night when 43 people were disappeared and 6 people were murdered, there's still debate about what really happened and new revelations coming out in a detective story that unfortunately is a tragic reality. Today on Interviews from Mexico, we'll talk to 2 brothers who've made a new documentary film on the night of Iguala, focusing on the role of the Mexican Army.
Queremos paz, no queremos seguir con esto. Esto no es lo que queremos, esto es lo que quieren para el futuro de México.
The role of the Army on that fateful night of September 26th and into the early morning of September 27th has become a center of attention here in Mexico. And today we're very pleased to be here with 2 experts on this issue. Coizta Grecko is a film producer and director, and Temoris Grecko is an international independent journalist. The 2 brothers have just produced a new documentary film, Watching Them Die, the Army on the Night of Iguala. Thank you so much for being here with us on Interviews from Mexico. I wanted to start by asking you, Coizta, what gave you the idea of using this issue for your documentary film? Why this, and what was the process?
El proceso comenzó hace un año después de
The process started a year ago. After what happened, we met up with a group of friends. All of us communication professionals, journalists, and we created a collective called Ojos de Perro, and we started to produce video journalism pieces about this issue, above all focused against impunity. It's called Dog Eyes Against Impunity. From there, well, with all the information we complied, because my brother had covered Guerrero a lot, we said, well, why don't we make a documentary? So, the documentary was born with this idea of collectivity, where everybody is contributing their work. And well, we have put together an incredible team, and we have gathered a lot of information that, well, has given us a very different panorama, has given us a very different perspective than what we did earlier. No, we have helped bring to light things that earlier we had no idea existed.
And also, as journalists, we had a few things we were concerned about because we were seeing Ayotzinapa is a very attractive place. The school, the way the students live, the type of community that they have, the actions that they take. And this is very important, and it had been the focus of many works. And also of protests in Mexico City, the way that society came out to protest. Well, in Mexico City and in other places, but it seemed to us that it was leaving out a key point, a point that journalistically is stronger, to find out exactly what happened there. So we didn't want to content ourselves with some analysts who explained to us what happened. We wanted to go ourselves to look for evidence. We wanted to put the actions of the army in context, because something that is very important to us a year after is that the tragedy of Iguala didn't start on the 26th of September. The tragedy of Iguala began years ago. A city that was calm was turned into a center of criminal terror.
And no one's really talked about this aspect very much.
And it's a phenomenon that was occurring under the calm watch, and we need to say it, under the complicit watch of the 27th Battalion, which is based in Iguala, and in general of the federal authorities, and that is to say that this doesn't happen in a vacuum. The fuel reign of terror is not separated or isolated from the rest of the country. It's not isolated to the state. It's part of a system of impunity that prevails in Mexico, and now is expressed like this. But in other places, it has been expressed in other ways, like in Apatzingan, like with the 72 migrants.
Well, Temoris, let's cut to the quick. What are your conclusions regarding the role of the Army that night in the crimes of Ayotzinapa?
That is what worries us a lot, because in the end, the Mexican Army is is what's supposed to protect the sovereignty, and it's the institution that should be the most trustworthy institution of the country, because on its shoulders rests the viability of Mexico as an independent state. However, in Guerrero and other places, the army has been involved with criminal groups since the 60s. It was involved in the dirty war, in the repression against citizens who exercised their right to demonstrate. And in this case, it has been complicit on a local level, with the local political authorities and criminal groups that were the actors there.
And in some ways as an accomplice.
For example, the mayor Abarca, who is being held responsible for the whole crime, everything, he certainly had something to do with what happened on the night of Iguala, but he is not the only one responsible. That is, they're limiting the responsibility to him, no? So the mayor Abarca is a man who made his fortune from nothing, taking advantage of the conditions of Iguala as a center of accumulation of opiates, of heroin, of opium, that later gets sent to the United States, as a place where there are money-changing centers and a very big gold industry that allows for money laundering, that allows for money to be hidden. And so Abarca received a surprising gift from the Mexican army. They gave him 52,000 square meters of land that were next to the 27th Battalion's barracks, so that he could build a shopping mall, the most modern mall in northern Guerrero.
So this was a personal gift and not even a gift to the city. And what's the explanation the army gives?
They claim that it was in the benefit of the public interest, that it was something that the city needed, that it would help the city's infrastructure. But it ended up being a private business, and the army never objected, never said anything. Why did they make it a shopping mall? And that's not all. The army didn't even have the authority to give public land to an individual.
And Coizta, what other elements of evidence did you encounter as you formed this group of investigative reporters and producers in the process of making this documentary film?
Well, one of the things was that, to start with, as we were gathering information, we had access to people who had not been in the media. For example, the kids who come with us to reconstruct the events. They hadn't been visible, and also not. That is, one of the things that we wanted to achieve is that when they explained to us the situation of they were taking the boys away, they didn't mention certain things, like they said, it's that, they are 200 meters, 600 meters away from the battle line, and right here, they passed in front of the camera. So, one of the aims of the documentary was to show the people, so it was really clear, what distance are we talking about? So we put the camera in the car and we drove right by, and we said, okay, this is the distance we're talking about. Or supposedly, no one realized what was going on when these boys were attacked. And it all happened between 10:30 at night and 2 a.m. on a Friday night in a city that currently has an active nightlife.
And it's hard, that's important because sometimes you're reading the details and it's hard to visualize what happened here and then when and then what, so that's an important part of the puzzle.
One of the important things was when we went to the dump. We went there with the drone and we took aerial pictures. The filmmakers took aerial drone photos of the Cocula dump. And well, when you're there, you see the way they explained it, that they say they threw the bodies from above and they fell down into the dump. But when you're there, you realize that that's not possible. So, part of the documentary is, well, to show this. This is to say, this garbage dump represents the big lie. This garbage dump, that's where they said, this is where they killed the students. Case closed. No? And you go there and you say, how stupid do they think we are? Because everything is based on this lie. Everything about their truth is based on garbage. So, it was there. That we found out.
Well, we're going to take a short pause. We'll be right back. Stay with us. We'll be back after a brief moment. Welcome back. We're here talking to Temoris Grecko, Coizta Grecko, about the night of Iguala and the role of the army. We were talking about how the army gave a gift to the corrupt mayor of Iguala and the context of corruption and complicity that existed before the attacks on Ayotzinapa. And I know this would be speculation on your part, but did you find any elements of a motive there?
There's no definitive conclusion. There can't be because information is being hidden. There is a maneuver of a big cover-up that implicates the officials who are carrying out the investigation.
And they even refuse to be interrogated by the group of experts, right?
Well, in general, Cienfuegos just gave an interview on TV where he made it seem like a personal issue, that he, having been a soldier for 52 years, won't allow his soldiers to be interrogated. But obviously, it's not a personal question. There are various... Guerrero is a super complicated situation. I've covered the Middle East for more than 10 years, and I get the impression that Guerrero is the Middle East of Mexico because of the variety of factors that come together that are very hard to interpret. For example, we have several things. One of them is the obvious interests of organized crime, the evident interests of organized crime, to protect their business and to protect their networks of complicity and protection that sustain them, no? So we have the interests of the complicit elements to cut their ties with the mayor of Iguala. That's why we see the attempt to limit this as if it were just a local issue that involves local criminals and local politicians and local police, right? But no, this goes much deeper. So there's also the motivation to cut these ties. And there's also the fact that the students of Ayotzinapa, that school is a place where traditionally there has been very important political activism. Several important guerrilla leaders have come from Ayotzinapa, who the 27th Battalion hunted down and killed. And since then, they have seen the Ayotzinapa teachers and students not as citizens, but as an enemy that needs to be watched, no? That needs to be kept under watch also. So this, or there is a political factor, a business factor, and a factor of complicity. And I think that between these spaces, this is the web. These are the extremes of the web that explain why they acted in such a brutal manner, and at the same time in such an organized manner that night in Iguala.
So we've got kind of a lethal cocktail there of factors that led to this extreme violence. And without the transparency, without the additional information that we need, it's very hard to kind of sort those out and to say this was it, I would imagine. Coizta, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that explanation?
Definitely. It's not something that this cocktail, this phenomenon, is not something that only exists in Iguala Guerrero. It's something that is dispersed around the whole country, at various levels, and also of knowledge. There are places that shouldn't be forgotten, like in the Sierra Tarahumara, where the cartels do whatever they want, and so there hasn't been something that, say, shines a light on those situations. We don't know about it there either. So we hope that based on this attention on the army regarding its role, whether it be omission or complicity or both, this will be a catalyst for other parts of the country for these issues to come out. It's a shame that we need to say that these negative issues need to emerge, but in the end, it's the only way that we have of dealing with this issue. And above all, well, we need to, that's it. That is, to build a front against impunity and corruption in this country, and starting with the institutions. So if General Cienfuegos says his honor is on the line, well, it's an honor for us to be fighting impunity and corruption. We need to build a front against impunity and corruption. So, if the chief of our armed forces has that idea of honor, what can we expect of everyone else?
Yeah, it's a great concern that they would have this kind of reaction. Let's talk a little bit more about the government's reaction. How do you see it as you watch every step of this case? How would you characterize the reaction, especially of the federal government, but also, of course, the state government in Guerrero?
Well, it has been chaotic with the two governments, no? At the first, it seemed like the federal government was seeing it as an opportunity to strike at its political rivals. They obviously cut all the ties that they could connect them to what happened there. They wanted to restrict what was happening there, because both the local government and the state government belong to the party that is more or less the opposition, no? Or it defines itself as the opposition, but in reality, that's pretty much a joke. And it was a way to say, look at that bad government. They are protecting narcos. They are putting narcos in political offices. The state government realized that it was trapped between what was going on in the municipality and the strategy of the government to isolate it. They tried to react, they themselves leaked information to the press with the goal of trying to promote their own version, what they couldn't say publicly. They leaked it to the press. This has been, this attitude, although it has been an attitude of self-defense on the part of the state government, was one of the first elements that helped us figure out that something was wrong, that wasn't what they wanted us to believe.
And also this game of playing one party against each other in the damage control stage of the issue had the effect that people immediately saw that the entire political class was somehow involved in this, all three major political parties, and they went directly to a generalized protest against the political class, no?
I think that the political class in general thought that the citizenry was stupider than it is, that it would be easier to trick them, but they failed. There had been a series of precedents of scandals that were causing problems for the federal government. Tlatlaya had already happened. That is the massacre committed by the army against a group of people that was completely staged. They tried to hide it, calling it a confrontation, when what really happened was that they executed people who they already had in custody, no? And then there was the scandal with the White House, this quote-unquote White House. This was after Ayotzinapa, the scandal with a government contractor who had been awarded multi-million-dollar contracts that participants as a realtor for the president's wife and for the Secretary of Finance. So the people didn't believe it. But also in the state political sphere, everyone already knew. Everybody knew that Abarca was that he was a criminal, that he was connected to Guerreros Unidos, the cartel. Everyone knew who the protectors of Abarca were, a senator, Lázaro Mazón, an important deputy, Sebastián de la Rosa, the governor, Ángel Rivero, Ángel Aguirre. So no one believed it. Everyone knew that there were connections, and at the same time that the PRD, his opposition party, had left, it stopped being opposition years ago and was closely tied to the federal government. So nobody bought their story.
So, on the one hand, we do have a more informed citizenry, and as you said, the case of Ayotzinapa, with all the tragedy that it implies, has created perhaps a window that can shed light on cases like this that are happening all over the country. We're going to go to another break. We'll be right back. We're back with Temoris and Coizta Grecko talking about the Army's role in Ayotzinapa. We've established that there are many elements of the Army's role, its presence at the scene of the crime, its involvement in certain acts even before the attacks. Why is this so important?
One of the people we interviewed, José Reveles, affirmed that without a doubt the army was involved there, but they didn't want to get their hands dirty, and they coordinated everything, using their communication system and also their agents on the ground. From the start, the army played dumb in a shameful way. For an institution that has had the history that this army has had, the first thing they said was, we found out at the end. Later they said, well, yes, we asked a few things, but the chief of the municipal police tricked us and told us that nothing was happening even though we knew something was. So we later find out that they had known all along, that they had people all over the area and that they had also had people working in the communication system, the C4 center. They had 2 soldiers there, 2 officials working with the system, no? So they knew the whole time. And now they say that it wasn't their place to intervene, that it wasn't the municipal but the state police, that it wasn't their place. They were just trying to avoid responsibility and tried to put it on others, when there's a very important point here. The responsibility of the army is to protect the citizens of Mexico, and they always knew what was happening. We know that they knew because they have declassified documents in which information memos that they they gave to the commander of the battalion, the commander of the military zone in which they informed, step by step, minute by minute, what had happened, who were the actors, who participated, that is, who had done it, and who was attacking who. And also because there are declarations that they didn't want the public to know about, that they tried to hide. But thanks to the system of access of information, now we can see. There are declarations from soldiers that say, for example, when they went to order them to leave the barracks to patrol, they told them in the center of the city they are attacking demonstrators. The army knew what was going on, and the army chose not to act. The question is why?
Well, the film is called Watching Them Die. So there at once we have a crime of omission, at least. At what points from the evidence do we see the army actually present in a position to either save students that are wounded or dying or prevent further attacks? We know, for example, that the clinic is one of them, no?
Where the official version is that they got to the clinic to check out the wounded boys. They take their names very politely. They asked if they needed anything, and the kids said, "No, we're about to leave, and we're taking our wounded friend." And the wounded guy was a boy who took a bullet in the face and had a broken jawbone. The army's version is completely contrary to what the students say, and this version is completely contrary to what the boys themselves said. They say that when they got there, they pointed their guns at them. They told them who they were, and later they literally ran them out of the hospital.
So let me take a moment to describe what the C4 is. The C4 is a command center where the Army was in charge that night, and also present are the state and the federal police forces that are operating in that area. So the knowledge that was concentrated there is very important for this night.
That's right, and also, we already know that there were reports that is, from the start, they knew that the boys were going to Chilpancingo, that they went there first to get the buses, and then they went to Iguala, so they already knew that they were going, that Ayotzinapa students were traveling in those buses. That is, well, it's hard to understand how something like that, I don't know, just gets out of your control. If you come and say, listen, some narcos got confused, and they are the police, and hey, they came in and killed some people, so we're going to intervene and resolve the situation. But no, what they do is launch a whole apparatus of a cover-up operation, completely, from the evidence, everything. And the mere fact that the soldiers don't allow, well, as if it were an offense to the army to have to explain.
So, are we talking about incompetence here, or a cover-up, or some kind of combination of both?
It's the combination, without a doubt. The proceedings that have taken place in the investigation are pathetic. If they want to do a cover-up, as they have done or have tried to do, they have been totally inept at it. And it has been we have recordings, for example, of when they were saying that they had found bags of remains with the ashes of the students in a river, and you could die laughing listening to them. The motorboats that go out into the river, their motors break down. The scuba divers jump into the river and the water comes up to their knees. So these are sites where you can't believe that a bag full of ashes could possibly survive the conditions of the river and the current and the rocks. So there's a lot of ineptitude. The other is definitely a cover-up. To obtain information about what happened has been a permanent struggle, a constant struggle, on the part of journalists, the experts groups, the Argentine forensics team that helped with the investigation, the forced disappearances group of the United Nations. It has been a permanent struggle to get out of the army and the government each little piece of information. This is because they don't want it to be known, because they want to hold on to their historic truth, which is held up like a house of cards, and because they are not really interested in finding out what happened that night.
Well, I'm afraid we'll have to end it there. Thanks so much for joining us today on Interviews from Mexico. And thank you. I'm Laura Carlson. We'll be back next week on Interviews from Mexico.